The stars in the empty space near the edge of the solar system suddenly began to shimmer and bend. The darkness twisted like water being stirred by an invisible hand. Then, with a flash of bright blue light, something massive appeared where nothing had been before. It was not one ship. It was many ships, hundreds of them. The alien vessels hung in the cold vacuum like giant crystals made of ice and metal. Each ship was beautiful in its own terrible way. Their hulls gleamed with a pale, ghostly light that seemed to come from within the metal itself. Strange symbols covered their surfaces, glowing with colors that human eyes had never seen before. Admiral Vextar stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the largest vessel in the fleet. His body was tall and thin, covered in smooth gray skin that reflected the light from the control panels around him. 4 arms moved with quick, precise motions as he worked the ship's controls. His head was long and narrow, with large black eyes that saw everything. When he was pleased, his mouth parts would click together in a sound that other species had learned to fear. The Admiral looked at the small yellow star ahead of them. Around it, several planets moved in their slow dance through space. The third planet from the star was the one he wanted. His scouts had been watching it for many cycles, listening to the strange radio signals that came from its surface. "Humans," he said, and his mouth parts clicked with amusement. "Such a young species, such a primitive world." His second-in-command, Commander Zithka, moved closer. She was smaller than the Admiral, but just as deadly. Her weapons training was legendary throughout the Zephyrian fleet. "Admiral, our sensors show no orbital defenses around their planet," she reported. "No energy shields, no military space stations. Their technology appears to be very basic." Vextar's eyes grew bright with excitement. This was going to be easier than he had hoped. In the past 50 years, his fleet had conquered 17 different worlds. Each time, they had faced desperate resistance from species that knew they were about to lose everything. The battles had been long and difficult. Many Zephyrian warriors had died. But this time would be different. The humans seemed to have no idea what was coming. "How many ships do they have in space?" the Admiral asked. "Very few, sir. We detect some small vessels moving between their planet and their moon. Nothing that could threaten even our smallest fighter craft." The Admiral walked to the great window at the front of his bridge. Through it, he could see the other ships of his fleet spread out like a deadly cloud in space. Each ship contained hundreds of warriors. Each warrior was trained from birth to fight and conquer. The Zephyrian Empire had spread across the galaxy by taking what they wanted from weaker species. "Their radio signals show they fight among themselves constantly," Commander Zithka continued. "They seem to spend most of their time making war on their own kind. They have not learned to unite against outside threats." This made the Admiral even more pleased. Divided enemies were always easier to defeat. The humans would probably surrender quickly once they realized how hopeless their situation was. Then they could be put to work in the Empire's mines and factories. The strong ones might even be trained as soldiers for future conquests. "Begin the approach," Vextar ordered. "But slowly. I want them to see us coming. I want them to understand what is about to happen to their world." The great fleet began to move forward. Each ship was powered by engines that bent space itself, allowing them to travel faster than light. But now they moved at normal speed, like hunters stalking prey. As they flew deeper into the solar system, the fleet's sensors gathered more information about the humans and their planet. The species lived on only one world, with no colonies on other planets. Their population was large but scattered across the surface in thousands of separate groups. They had many different languages and seemed to disagree about almost everything. "Perfect," thought the Admiral. "They will be too busy fighting each other to organize any real defense." The human ships they detected were small and slow. Most seemed to be used for carrying supplies or conducting simple research. None appeared to be built for war. The largest human vessel they found was a space station that orbited their planet. It was tiny compared to even the smallest Zephyrian warship. "Admiral," called out the communications officer. "We are receiving signals from the human space station. They seem to be trying to contact us." "Ignore them for now," Vextar replied. "Let them wonder what we are. Let them fear what we might do. Fear makes the conquest easier. But privately, the Admiral was curious about what the humans might say. Would they beg for mercy? Would they try to offer him gifts in exchange for their lives? Most species did one or the other when they first encountered the Zephyrian fleet. The fleet continued its slow approach. They passed the outer planets, large gas giants with many moons. The Admiral's sensors detected no hidden bases or defensive platforms. The humans really seemed to have no military presence in space at all. Such confidence, Commander Zithka observed. Or such ignorance. They must believe they are alone in the universe. "Both will serve our purposes," the Admiral replied. As they flew closer to the human planet, the fleet's appearance began to change. Weapon ports opened along the sides of each ship. Energy began to build in the plasma cannons that could melt mountains. The ships spread out into attack formation, ready to rain destruction on any target the Admiral chose. The humans were still sending radio signals, but now the transmissions seemed more urgent. The Admiral could imagine the panic spreading across their world as they realized they were facing something far beyond their ability to fight. "Sir," the communications officer said again, "the signals are becoming stronger. They appear to be coming from many different locations on the planet's surface." "Military bases?" asked Commander Zithka. "Unknown, sir. The technology is too primitive for our sensors to determine much detail." The Admiral decided it was time to end the suspense. He had played with his prey long enough. Now it was time to make his demands and watch the humans realize how hopeless their situation truly was. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Let us introduce ourselves to these humans." The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of a human. The creature was smaller than a Zephyrian, with only 2 arms and strange hair growing from the top of its head. It wore some kind of uniform and sat in what appeared to be a command center. The human spoke first, its voice carried across space by radio waves. "Unknown vessels, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the International Space Station. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." Admiral Vextar stepped forward so the human could see him clearly. He made sure his weapons and the deadly appearance of his ship were visible in the background. "I am Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire," he announced, his voice strong and commanding. "Your species is now under our control. You have one choice to make. Surrender immediately and become servants of the Empire, or be destroyed. You have 10 of your time periods called minutes to decide." The human captain stared at him for a long moment. The Admiral expected to see fear, or maybe desperate attempts to negotiate. Instead, the human's face showed something he did not expect. Determination. "Negative," Captain Chen replied calmly. "Earth stands." Admiral Vextar's mouth parts clicked with surprise, and then with dark amusement. These humans were braver than he had expected, but bravery without power was just another form of foolishness. "So be it," he said, and cut the communication. The conquest of Earth was about to begin. Captain Sarah Chen sat in the command center of the International Space Station, looking at the blank screen where the alien admiral had been just moments before. Around her, the station's crew worked at their controls with calm, practiced movements. No one seemed surprised by what had just happened. "All stations, this is Captain Chen," she said into her microphone. "Condition red. The package is confirmed hostile. Repeat, the package is confirmed hostile." Across the Earth and throughout the solar system, those words triggered responses that had been planned for decades. In hidden bunkers buried deep underground, massive computers came to life. In control rooms that did not appear on any public map, men and women in military uniforms began pressing buttons and turning keys. The alien admiral had made one very important mistake. He thought the humans were primitive and divided. He was. Wrong on both counts. Dr. James Morrison sat in a facility buried 3 miles beneath the mountains of Colorado. As the director of the Solar Defense Network, he had spent the last 20 years preparing for this exact moment. The message from Captain Chen appeared on his screen, along with data from sensors that the aliens did not know existed. 312 enemy vessels, reported his aide, Colonel Martinez. Size range from 200 meters to over 3 kilometers. Energy readings are off the charts. Any sign they've detected our assets? Dr. Morrison asked. Negative, sir. They're still moving slowly toward Earth. Their sensors seem to be focused on the planet and our civilian installations. Dr. Morrison nodded. The aliens were making the same mistake that many enemies had made before them. They were looking at what humans wanted them to see, not at what was really there. The truth was that humanity had been preparing for first contact since the 1960s. Not the peaceful kind that scientists talked about in public, but the other kind. The kind where visitors from space came not as friends, but as conquerors. The first hints had come from radio telescopes that detected patterns in space that should not exist. Signals that seemed artificial, but came from sources too far away to be human. Then came the discovery of faster-than-light travel, hidden in equations, that most scientists thought were just theoretical. But some humans had understood what those discoveries really meant. If humanity could figure out how to travel faster than light, then other species probably could too. And if they were more advanced than humans, they might not come in peace. Status report on all defense platforms, Dr. Morrison ordered. Platforms 1 through 47 are online and ready, Colonel Martinez replied. Power levels at maximum. Targeting computers are locked onto the enemy fleet. The alien admiral would have been shocked to learn what those defense platforms really were. To his sensors, they looked like ordinary satellites, the kind that primitive species used for communication and weather monitoring. In reality, they were weapons that could destroy planets. Each platform contained a magnetic railgun that could fire tungsten rods at nearly the speed of light. The aliens' energy shields, designed to stop plasma weapons and laser beams, would be useless against chunks of metal moving that fast. Sir, Colonel Martinez said, we're getting reports from the hidden bases. Those bases were another secret that the aliens knew nothing about. Over the past 50 years, humans had built military installations inside asteroids throughout the solar system. From the outside, they looked like natural rocks floating in space. Inside, they contained missile systems, fighter craft, and some weapons that even Dr. Morrison did not fully understand. Asteroid Base 7 reports ready, Martinez continued. Stealth fighters are armed and waiting for launch orders. Base 12 has all missile tubes loaded. Base 23 says their new experimental weapon is charged and ready for testing. Dr. Morrison smiled grimly. The aliens thought they were attacking a primitive world with no defenses. Instead, they were about to face a military network that had been built specifically to destroy exactly this kind of threat. On the space station, Captain Chen watched the alien fleet continue its approach. She knew that every human military leader on Earth was watching the same display. In the Pentagon, in the Kremlin, in military headquarters around the world, generals and admirals were coordinating humanity's response. Captain, said Lieutenant Williams, her communications officer, we're receiving a priority message from General Harrison at Earth Defense Command. The screen flickered, showing the weathered face of a 4-star general. Behind him, Chen could see the main command center where representatives from every major military on Earth worked together. Captain Chen, this is General Harrison. You are now the official spokesperson for the human race. Whatever happens in the next few minutes, remember that you represent all of us. Understood, sir, Chen replied. Any change in our rules of engagement? Negative. The rules remain the same as always. If they shoot first, we respond with overwhelming force. Make sure they understand that we gave them a chance. The rules of engagement had been debated and refined for decades. Humans would not start a war with alien visitors, but they would finish one if forced to. The idea was simple. Any species aggressive enough to attack without provocation was too dangerous to be allowed to survive. "Sir," Lieutenant Williams called out, "the alien fleet is changing formation. They're spreading out into what looks like an attack pattern." Chen nodded. She had expected this. The Admiral had given them 10 minutes to surrender, and about 8 minutes had passed. Soon, the aliens would realize that no surrender was coming. "All stations," she announced, "prepare for incoming transmission from the enemy fleet." The HFY screen activated again, showing Admiral Vextar. This time, his expression was different. The amusement was gone, replaced by cold anger. "Humans," he said, his voice carrying across space, "your time has ended. Since you choose to resist, you will be destroyed. Your planet will be burned clean, and your species will be erased from the galaxy. This is your final warning." Captain Chen looked directly into the alien's large black eyes. "Admiral Vexitar," she said calmly, "you are making a mistake. Withdraw your fleet now and no harm will come to you. This is your final warning." The alien admiral's mouth parts clicked rapidly, a sound that his crew recognized as extreme anger. "You dare to threaten me? You with your tiny ships and primitive weapons? I will enjoy watching your world burn." "Admiral," Chen said, her voice still calm and steady, "you are about to attack a sovereign world without provocation. We have the right to defend ourselves. If you open fire, we will consider it an act of war and respond accordingly." "War?" The Admiral's laughter was a horrible sound. "What war could you possibly fight against the Zephyrian Empire? Your entire species could not destroy a single one of our ships." Chen leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, I'm going to tell you something important. My species has been fighting wars for over 10,000 years. We've fought with sticks and stones, with swords and arrows, with gunpowder and bullets, with tanks, and airplanes with nuclear weapons and guided missiles. We've never stopped fighting, and we've gotten very, very good at it." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We've been waiting for someone like you for a long time. We've been preparing. We've been practicing. And now you're here, about to give us the one thing we've always been best at, a war to fight." The alien admiral stared at her for a long moment. Then his expression changed to one of contempt. "Enough of this foolishness," he said. "Destroy them all." The communication ended. Captain Chen turned to her crew. "All stations, this is Captain Chen. The aliens have declared their intent to destroy Earth. As of this moment, we are at war. Weapons free. Repeat, weapons free." Throughout the solar system, the hidden defenses of humanity came to life. The real battle was about to begin. The first shots of the war came from the alien fleet. Admiral Vexitar's flagship fired a massive beam of superheated plasma toward Earth. The energy weapon was powerful enough to boil away oceans and melt continents. It had destroyed cities on 17 different worlds. The beam never reached its target. Exactly 2.3 seconds after the aliens opened fire, something impossible happened. The satellites that had been floating peacefully around Earth suddenly revealed their true nature. What the aliens had thought were simple communication devices were actually weapons platforms, and they began firing back. Tungsten rods, each, one the size of a telephone pole, shot out from the hidden railguns at tremendous speed. They moved so fast that they seemed to appear instantly beside the alien ships. The rods hit with the force of nuclear weapons, but without the radiation or the flash of light. They just punched straight through. The first alien ship to die was a medium-sized cruiser on the left side of their formation. One moment it was there, weapons charging for a second shot at Earth. The next moment, there was a hole clean through its center, and the ship was breaking apart as atmosphere and crew were sucked out into space. Admiral Vextar stared in shock as 12 more of his ships simply ceased to exist. The tungsten rods moved too fast for his sensors to track properly. His crew could only watch as their ships were destroyed by weapons they couldn't even see coming. "Shields!" he shouted. "Raise all shields!" But the Zephyrian shields were designed to stop energy weapons like lasers and plasma beams. They were useless against solid objects moving at such incredible speeds. The tungsten rods passed through the energy barriers as if they weren't even there. "Sir," his weapons officer called out, "we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. There are weapons platforms everywhere." That was when the asteroids began to move. What Admiral Vextar had dismissed as simple space rocks suddenly revealed themselves to be military bases. Hidden doors opened in their rocky surfaces, and missiles began pouring out. Hundreds of them, then thousands. Each missile was guided by computers that could calculate the movement of targets across millions of miles of space. Each one carried enough explosive power to crack open a mountainside, and they were all aimed at the Zephyrian fleet. "Evasive maneuvers," the Admiral ordered. "All ships, evasive maneuvers." But his fleet had been designed for attacking planets, not for fighting this kind of mobile warfare. The ships were large and powerful, but they were also slow to change direction. The human missiles were small and fast, and they seemed to anticipate every move the aliens made. The first wave of missiles hit the alien formation like a swarm of angry wasps. Explosions bloomed throughout the fleet as ships tried desperately to shoot down the incoming weapons. Some succeeded, but there were too many missiles and not enough time. A Zephyrian destroyer vanished in a ball of fire. A troop transport broke in half, spilling soldiers into the vacuum of space. The aliens' return fire was devastating, but it was aimed at empty space where the missile platforms had been just moments before. The humans, it seemed, understood something about warfare that the Zephyrians had never learned. Always keep moving and never be where your enemy expects you to be. "Sir," Commander Zithka reported, her voice tight with worry, "we've lost 47 ships in the first 3 minutes. At this rate, the entire fleet will be destroyed within the hour." Admiral Vextar couldn't believe what he was seeing. His sensors showed that the humans had turned the entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every satellite, every piece of space debris that he had ignored was now revealing itself to be part of a massive defense network. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They're primitives. They should have no weapons that could threaten us." "Admiral," his science officer called out, "I'm reading the composition of those projectiles. They're not using exotic materials or advanced energy systems. It's just metal rods moving at extremely high velocity." The Admiral's mouth parts clicked in disbelief. The humans had taken the simplest possible weapon, a chunk of metal, and found a way to make it devastatingly effective. It was brutal in its simplicity and terrifying in its efficiency. But what made it even worse was the way the humans fought. There was no panic, no desperate charging into battle, no heroic last stands. Instead, there was a cold, calculated precision that made his trained warriors look like amateurs. Every human attack was perfectly coordinated. When the railguns fired, the missiles would be launched to hit targets trying to evade the rods. When alien ships turned to avoid the missiles, they would fly directly into the path of another rail gun. It was as if the humans could predict exactly what his fleet would do and had prepared responses for every possible action. "Sir!" the communications officer shouted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human space station." The screen showed Captain Chen again, but now her calm expression had been replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "you have 30 seconds to order your fleet to withdraw beyond the orbit of Pluto. If you do not comply, we will destroy every ship in your fleet." The Admiral's anger flared. "You think you can threaten me? I have over 200 ships remaining. Your tiny defense network cannot stand against the full might of the Zephyrian Empire." "Admiral," Chen replied, "you haven't seen our full might yet." That was when the stealth fighters attacked. They came out of the dark spaces between the planets, invisible to Zephyrian sensors until they were almost close enough to touch. The alien fleet's instruments had been designed to detect large objects like ships and space stations. They couldn't see small, fast fighters that had been built specifically to avoid detection. The human fighters were like nothing Admiral Vextar had ever encountered. They moved through space like living things, dodging between the larger alien ships and striking at weak points in their armor. Each fighter carried weapons that could punch through the hulls of ships 100 times their size. But it wasn't just their weapons that made them deadly. It was the way they fought. The human pilots flew their ships as if they had been born in space. They used the alien fleet's own size against them, hiding behind destroyed ships and using the debris as cover. When the aliens tried to target them, the fighters would slip away into the shadow of a larger vessel, only to appear somewhere else, entirely. "They're using our own ships against us," Commander Zithka observed with something that might have been admiration. "They're turning our formation into a maze that only they can navigate." The Admiral watched in growing horror as his fleet was systematically torn apart. The humans weren't just defeating them. They were destroying them with an efficiency that spoke of years of planning and preparation. "Sir," his science officer reported, "I'm detecting something else. There are energy readings from the outer system that don't match anything in our database." "What kind of energy readings?" "Unknown, sir. But they're building towards something. Something big." Admiral Vextar realized that he had made a terrible mistake. These humans weren't primitive at all. They were predators, and they had been waiting for prey like his fleet to arrive. "All ships," he ordered, "begin withdrawal to safe distance. We need to regroup and—" His words were cut off as another wave of missiles struck the fleet. This time. They came from 6 different directions at once, making it impossible for his ships to defend against all of them. More alien vessels died in fire and twisted metal. The humans, Admiral Vextar realized, were not just defending their world, they were hunting his fleet, and they were very good at it. The retreat began, but the Admiral wondered if any of his ships would survive long enough to escape. Admiral Vextar's order to retreat came too late. The human defenders had anticipated this moment and were ready for it. As the surviving Zephyrian ships tried to turn away from Earth and flee toward the outer system, they discovered that the humans had one more surprise waiting for them. The retreat route was blocked. Hidden bases that had remained silent during the first part of the battle now revealed themselves. Massive installations built inside the largest asteroids opened up like mechanical flowers, exposing weapons that the Admiral had never seen before. These weren't railguns or missile launchers. These were something new and terrifying. "Sir," his science officer called out, his voice shaking, "those energy readings I detected earlier, they're coming from those installations. I think they're some kind of particle beam weapons." The first human superweapon fired a stream of accelerated particles that moved at nearly the speed of light. The beam cut through 3 Zephyrian ships in a single shot, slicing them cleanly in half. The edges of the cuts glowed white-hot where the weapon had passed through armor that was supposed to be indestructible. "How many of those things do they have?" Commander Zithka demanded. The answer came in the form of 6 more beams firing simultaneously from different directions. 12 more alien ships simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons that turned matter into energy. Admiral Vextar realized that his fleet was trapped. The humans had surrounded them with weapons platforms, and every direction led to more destruction. But what made it even worse was the way the humans coordinated their attacks. There was no confusion, no wasted shots, no friendly fire incidents. Every weapon fired at exactly the right moment to achieve maximum damage. It was as if the entire human defense network was controlled by a single mind that could see everything and plan perfectly. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving tactical data from our remaining ships. The humans appear to be using some kind of quantum communication network. Their response time is essentially instantaneous across the entire system." That explained how they could coordinate attacks across millions of miles of space with such precision. But it also meant that the humans had technology that the Zephyrian Empire had only theorized about. These primitives were using communication systems that his own scientists couldn't build. "All ships," the Admiral ordered, "focus fire on the largest human installation. If we can destroy their command center, we might be able to disrupt their coordination." It was a desperate plan, but it was the only chance they had. The remaining Zephyrian ships turned their weapons on a massive asteroid base that seemed to be directing many of the attacks. Plasma beams and energy cannons fired together, concentrating enough firepower to destroy a moon. The human base's shields flared to life, absorbing the incoming energy. For a moment, Admiral Vextar thought they might have found a weakness. Then the base fired back. The return shot was devastating. A beam of pure energy, larger than any the aliens had fired, struck the center of the Zephyrian formation. 5 ships vanished instantly, and the ones around them were damaged by the explosion. "Their shields are stronger than ours," Commander Zithka observed, "and their weapons are more powerful. How is this possible?" The Admiral didn't have an answer. Everything he had been told about humans was wrong. They weren't primitive, they weren't divided, and they certainly weren't helpless. "Sir," the tactical officer shouted, "we have incoming fighters from multiple vectors. They're everywhere." The human stealth fighters had multiplied. What had started as a few dozen craft had somehow become hundreds. They swarmed around the alien fleet like angry insects, striking at weak points and vanishing before the aliens could respond. But these weren't the same fighters that had attacked before. These were larger, more heavily armed, and they moved with even greater coordination. Each one seemed to know exactly where every other fighter was, and they worked together like parts of a single organism. "They're not just attacking randomly," Commander Zithka realized. "They're targeting our life support systems, our communications arrays, our navigation equipment. They're trying to disable us, not just destroy us." She was right. The human fighters were striking with surgical precision, cutting away the alien fleet's ability to fight back without necessarily killing the crews. It was a level of tactical sophistication that spoke of a military tradition far older and more refined than anything the Zephyrians had developed. "Admiral," the science officer reported, "I'm detecting something else. There are ships moving toward us from the outer system. Large ships. I think it's a human fleet." Admiral Vextar's hearts sank. If the humans had been holding back their main fleet during the battle, then everything his forces had faced so far was just the opening move. The real attack was still coming. "How many ships?" he asked. "Difficult to determine, sir. They're using some kind of stealth technology that interferes with our sensors. But based on the gravitational distortions, at least 100 vessels, possibly more." The Admiral looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were the finest warriors in the Zephyrian Empire, veterans of dozens of conquests. But now they looked scared and confused. They had never faced an enemy like this before. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "we're receiving another transmission from the human captain." Captain Chen appeared on the screen again. Behind her, Admiral Vextar could see displays showing the positions of all the ships in both fleets. The human had been watching the entire battle, seeing every move his forces made. "Admiral Vextar," she said, "you now have less than 90 ships remaining out of your original 312. Your fleet is surrounded, outgunned, and cut off from escape. I'm offering you one final chance to surrender." "Surrender?" The Admiral's mouth parts clicked rapidly. "The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender." "Then you will die here," Chen replied simply. "All of you. Is your pride worth the lives of your remaining crews?" The Admiral looked at his tactical display. She was right about the numbers. His fleet had been reduced to scattered groups of damaged ships, surrounded by human weapons platforms and harassed by fighters they couldn't catch or kill. What? What are your terms? He asked, hating himself for the question. Unconditional surrender, Chen replied. You will power down your weapons and surrender your ships. Your crews will be treated according to the laws of war, but your vessels will be confiscated as reparations for your unprovoked attack on Earth. It was a total defeat. The greatest fleet in Zephyrian history, reduced to begging for mercy from a species they had intended to enslave. And if I refuse? The Admiral asked. Captain Chen's expression didn't change. Then in approximately 4 minutes, our main fleet will arrive and finish what you started. You've seen what our defensive systems can do. Our attack fleet is considerably more powerful. Admiral Vextar closed his eyes. In his mind, he could see the faces of the thousands of warriors under his command. They had followed him across the galaxy, trusting in his leadership. Now their lives depended on a decision that would destroy his career and his honor. But they would live. He began, then stopped. The words were the hardest he had ever spoken. I accept your terms. The bridge fell silent. Commander Zithka stared at him in shock. The weapons officers looked as if they couldn't believe what they had heard. Attention all ships, the Admiral said into his communicator. This is Admiral Vextar. Stand down all weapons. Prepare for surrender protocols. Captain Chen nodded. You've made the right choice, Admiral. Your crews will be treated with respect. As the human fighters pulled back and the weapons platforms powered down, Admiral Vextar realized that he had just witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A species that was supposed to be primitive had not only defeated the mightiest fleet in known space, but had done it in less than 15 minutes. The humans, he understood now, were not the prey. They were the predators, and they had just announced themselves to the galaxy. 3 months after the battle, Admiral Vextar sat in a small room aboard a human space station. The room was comfortable, but clearly a prison cell. Through the single window, he could see his flagship being slowly taken apart by human engineers, who were studying every piece of Zephyrian technology. The humans had kept their word about treating prisoners according to their laws of war. The Zephyrian crews were housed in clean facilities, given adequate food, and allowed to communicate with each other. But they were also thoroughly isolated from the galaxy at large, cut off from any chance of rescue or escape. Captain Chen entered the room carrying 2 cups of a hot liquid that the humans called coffee. She offered one to the Admiral, who took it carefully. Over the past months, these daily conversations had become routine. Your government has finally responded to our messages, Chen said, sitting down across from him. Admiral Vextar looked up with interest. What did they say? They claim that your attack on Earth was unauthorized. They say you acted without orders from the Imperial High Command, and they disavow all responsibility for your actions. The Admiral's mouth parts clicked bitterly. Of course they do. They're saving face while abandoning their own warriors. It's what politicians do when military operations fail. Chen nodded. We suspected as much. But it doesn't matter. We recorded everything that happened, including your communications before the attack. The galaxy will know who fired first. Over the past 3 months, the humans had been very busy. They had sent copies of the battle recordings to every major government in known space. The footage showed clearly that the Zephyrian fleet had approached Earth with hostile intent, demanded surrender, and opened fire when their demands were refused. The galactic response had been swift and dramatic. Species that had been conquered by the Zephyrian Empire saw the recordings as proof that the mighty Zephyrians could be defeated. Rebellions had broken out on a dozen worlds. The Empire's carefully maintained image of invincibility was shattered. Your people are quite clever, the Admiral admitted. They could have simply destroyed my fleet and been done with it. Instead, they chose to humiliate the Empire in front of the entire galaxy. It's much more effective than simple destruction. We prefer to avoid unnecessary killing when possible, Chen replied. But we also believe in making sure that aggressors understand the consequences of their actions. The Admiral took a sip of his coffee. The bitter taste had grown on him over the months. What will happen to my crews? That depends on your government. We've offered to exchange prisoners for formal recognition of Earth's sovereignty and a treaty guaranteeing that no Zephyrian forces will enter the Sol system again. So far, your leaders haven't responded to that offer. This didn't surprise the Admiral. The Empire's pride had been wounded, and wounded pride often led to poor decisions. They're probably planning another attack, a larger fleet with more advanced weapons. Captain Chen smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. We hope they do. The Admiral stared at her. You want them to attack again? Admiral, let me show you something. Chen activated a wall display that showed a map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the locations of Zephyrian worlds and fleets. Blue dots showed human positions. There were a lot more blue dots than there had been 3 months ago. We've been very busy since your attack, Chen explained. We've made contact with dozens of species that have been oppressed by your empire. We've shared technology with them. We've helped them organize resistance movements. We've built new bases throughout the galaxy. The Admiral studied the map with growing alarm. The humans hadn't just defended their world. They had used the victory as a launching point for something much larger. You're building an alliance, he realized. We're building a coalition of free worlds, Chen corrected. Species that are tired of being bullied by empires like yours. And we're teaching them how to fight back. The Admiral thought about the battle he had witnessed. The precision, the coordination, the ruthless efficiency of the human defense. If they were sharing that knowledge with other species. Your empire has made a lot of enemies over the centuries, Chen continued. We're simply giving those enemies the tools they need to defend themselves and the confidence to use them. This could lead to a galactic war, the Admiral warned. It could, Chen agreed. But it won't be the kind of war your empire is used to fighting. You're accustomed to attacking primitive worlds that can't fight back effectively. This time, you'll be facing enemies who know how to hurt you. The display changed, showing recent intelligence reports. Zephyrian outposts had been attacked by unknown forces using human weapons and tactics. Supply convoys had been ambushed by fighters that appeared and disappeared like ghosts. The Empire's expansion had not just stopped, it was being pushed back. The other great powers in the galaxy are watching all of this very carefully, Chen said. They're seeing that the Zephyrian Empire can be defeated. Some of them are starting to think about old grievances of their own. Admiral Vextar understood the implications. The Empire had maintained its position through fear and the belief that they were unbeatable. Now that myth was destroyed. Other powers that had submitted to Zephyrian dominance out of necessity might decide that submission was no longer required. You've started something that you might not be able to control, he warned. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But we didn't start this war. Your empire did when it decided that conquest and slavery were acceptable ways to expand. We're simply finishing what you began. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the implications of everything he had learned. Finally, he asked the question that had been troubling him for months. Why are you telling me all of this? Why share your plans with a prisoner? Captain Chen stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the remains of the Zephyrian flagship. Because, Admiral, you're going home. What? We're releasing you. You and a small crew to operate a single ship. You're going to return to the Zephyrian Empire and deliver a message from Earth. The Admiral couldn't hide his surprise. What message? Chen turned back to face him. That Earth and its allies are willing to coexist peacefully with any species that respects our sovereignty, but we will not tolerate aggression, conquest, or slavery. Any empire that practices these things will face the same fate as your fleet. They won't listen, the Admiral said. The High Command will see this as weakness. They'll assume you're afraid of a real war. Then they'll be making the same mistake you made, Chen replied. They'll be underestimating humans. And the species, we've taught to fight like humans. She walked toward the door, then paused. Admiral, let me give you some advice. When you get home, tell your leaders exactly what you saw here. Don't leave anything out. Don't try to make it sound less devastating than it was. Their survival may depend on understanding the truth. After she left, Admiral Vextar sat alone with his thoughts. Through the window, he could see human ships, moving through space with the same deadly grace he had witnessed during the battle. In the distance, alien vessels from a dozen different species worked alongside human crews, learning new ways to fight and defend themselves. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting, and the Zephyrian Empire was no longer the dominant force it had once been. The humans had changed everything in the space of a few minutes, and the changes were still spreading. The Admiral thought about the message he would carry home. His leaders would probably ignore his warnings, dismiss his reports as the ravings of a defeated commander trying to excuse his failure. They would plan new attacks, build larger fleets, and march confidently toward their own destruction. But he would deliver the message anyway, because Captain Chen was right about one thing. The survival of his people might depend on understanding what they were really facing. The humans had taught the galaxy a new lesson, that predators sometimes looked like prey, that the most dangerous enemies were the ones who appeared weak, and that a species that had spent its entire history learning how to fight wars was not one to be underestimated. Admiral Vextar finished his coffee and prepared for the journey home. He had a story to tell, and he wondered if anyone would be wise enough to listen. Outside his window, the human ships continued their patient work, preparing for whatever came next in a galaxy that would never be the same again.